Live. We're running. Hi, everyone. This is me and Ali. We're going to talk about Beachhead.
Hello. Yes, exciting event down in England, and I think probably the very first big outing for version 3 in 2025 in the
Yeah.
UK. So it's there's some high level players going. We've seen the army lists, and I think a quick little look into the meta as well is all in order. So yeah, here we
Yep.
go.
That's what we're going to do today. And it's not the biggest tournament that's run yet, but there's a lot of players going. I ended up losing count. Did you have the count for how many is actually attending?
I'm pretty sure it's in the mid-30s.
Yeah. So Cancun in Australia was
CanCon.
bigger. CanCon.
Yep.
CanCon. Not Can.
Cancun is where you go for a party.
Ah,
CanCon is where you go to wargame.
that's the difference, right? Um, that was bigger, but I mean that's Australia, so not UK and not what we're used to looking at and dealing with. So for us, that I think this is the biggest one in V3 yet, not just in 2015, sorry, 2025, but I mean in general, it's the biggest V3 tournament that I have gotten the nitty gritty on.
What I did like about the CanCon meta
Hmm.
was the look of how many players had obviously conformed to their single rifle platoon, and then how many other platoons they decided to add on. So if it was
Yeah,
just one platoon, if they were going three platoons, etc. So
yeah.
it's good to have that comparison that I'm pretty sure we should be able to do to Beachhead.
Yeah, because the guys at Beachhead have been nice enough to actually do a little bit of this meta analysis for us, so I didn't have to go over everything, which was really cool. Um, that they did that for us. So this is the meta of Beachhead, and the first things we're going to talk about is the spread of nations, and there is something really new in V3.
Yes, so it's the rise of Finland, which has been well documented on a lot of different podcasts and YouTube channels
Yeah.
yourself, your own not included. So Finland are making up 17% of the field, and that is 8 lists.
Yep.
Um,
That is a lot, and more or less there's a couple of lists that fall outside of Meta Finland, but most of them are running the Achilles special, the armored Finns with a lot of T20s, a lot of other unreliable stuff, captured Soviet stuff, right?
yeah.
Because you get such a huge discount. So that's
So
what's happening.
seeing Finland as the third most popular nation
Yeah,
uh, really
which
is a
is just
testament.
very unusual for what we have seen before.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a testament to where version 3 is right
yeah,
now in this moment, that
yeah,
we know that the unreliable points cost is wrong.
yeah.
So people are playing into that as to get as much enjoyment out of it as possible. You
While
can
it
have a
lasts.
yeah, while it lasts. You can look at the analysis. Somebody like the Soviet Union,
Mm.
who used to be first or second most popular, are now like 6% of the field. There's maybe only two or three token lists, and
Three lists in total,
yeah,
and that I mean that's just so insanely low because I, I'm used to seeing them make up at least half of the really competitive lists.
yeah.
They've gone.
So and the reason they're gone is we're on that sort of get you by
Yeah,
phase.
yeah,
But I think the omission of the lend lease units is a big impact to that.
I think so too.
To
Yeah,
be fair, then again, you look at something like the USA. I think the USA have just held steady.
yeah,
They've never always populated
yeah,
the sort of top end of the field, but they are sort of in the top four, which is what we've got here.
yeah. And I also think the right now the US have a couple of really interesting units. Right, they've still got access to the Darker Steward, although the Darker Steward has of course been nerfed some. They've got the Air Observer, which got better, and they've got the Rangers, which got better. So I think there's like a couple of units for the Americans that really work still to encourage people to play them.
I agree, and having tested them myself. If you've got a specific build that you want to do with them, then they can do so.
Yeah.
Always nice to see Hungary. I think you would always have seen minor nations crop
Yeah,
up in ones
one
and
one or
twos.
two, but like having two Hungarian lists including in this pack is actually quite a lot.
Yep, it's quite encouraging. And then Great Britain are
Mm.
holding strong.
Yeah.
So no, the only thing I am surprised about is the number of finish lists.
Yeah.
We knew there was going to be a couple more than there normally would be, but to have 8 is,
That's just
yeah,
yeah. That is new. That is definitely
yeah.
new.
But don't believe we'll see it again. So let's enjoy this. Finland
Enjoy
can
it while
enjoy
it
its moment in the
lasts.
sun.
Yes. Yeah. I also believe that this will be nerfed at some point in
Yep.
the
Very
immediate
immediate
future. So
future. Yep.
yeah.
The sun is setting quick, so roll your dice.
Yeah, while you got them.
Yeah.
Order dice. You and I have often talked about the Goldilocks zone of where do you like how many order dice do you want, because you want a lot, but you don't want too many because then your units become too weak, right? That's always an interesting meta discussion, and for this one, having 1250, they land sort of at 18.1 on average, with a spread between 10 and 25. What do we think about this, Ali?
It's no surprise. I
No.
think it's exactly where it should be. 16 players, sorry, 7 players have got 16 dice. I
Yeah.
would probably fall into that zone myself.
Mm.
18 players, it's a point where there's at least 2 dice in there that are going to be virtually useless.
Yeah.
They're just there to boost up everything else. But 16, if you've got 16 order dice at 1250, then every single unit has got a purpose
Yeah.
other than just to be alive and give you an order dice. I think as you creep up that scale, when you're getting to 22 and 23 order dice,
Mm.
there's a lot of ineffective stuff going
Mm.
on there. But I'm pretty
De-
sure from memory, some of
Depending
the
on
finish
whether or
lists
not
are in
they
there.
are, depending
Yeah,
on whether or not they're T20s for the Finns, right? Because if that's
exactly.
how you boost your order dice, then they're really useful.
Exactly. But that's in the
Yeah.
moment glitch. So I
Yeah.
think a standard finish list, once everything's priced appropriately, they would fall bang
Mm.
on 17 or 18 order dice as well
Yeah. Yeah.
at 1250.
I think personally, I lean a little bit higher than you do. I think 18, 19 would be my standard, but we agree that there is a point there where it tips. And once you get into the 20s, the high 20s, then most of the stuff you're bringing is just useless.
Yep,
And you're basically hoping to have your dice being pulled out the bag when you want them, so that the one or two units that you have that can do stuff will do it. Yeah.
exactly.
Then we have the platoon numbers, which you just mentioned, and these also I think are really interesting. Very few people are bringing just two platoons. I think that's because you basically can't spend 1250 points on just two platoons unless you're building a rifle platoon with all veterans and then an armored platoon with big heavy tanks.
It's this is that difference I did sort of allude to
Yeah,
at our opening statement. And from CanCon, they had 50 something players and they were playing
yeah,
1250 points as well.
yeah,
They had 9 lists
yeah,
that had a rifle platoon and a tank platoon.
yeah,
Whereas right now for Beachhead, we've got 1.
yeah,
And I know that as a rifle platoon and a tank platoon as I've read the lists.
yeah.
So the bulk of UK players see
Bringing more platoons.
3 platoons as being the optimal build.
And a
And
surprising number see four platoons as something desirable as well, don't they?
well, I would need to do a little bit of digging because the great thing at the moment is we have got a glut of data now starting to pour in.
Yeah.
Big events like Beachhead, CanCon, Warzone Atlanta, all their
Mm.
lists are starting to appear. And I spoke to Bo off air yesterday,
Yep.
and I've noticed that there's quite a specific plugin. There's a platoon plugin that I think it costs 103 points, and it's a heavy weapons platoon. And if
Yep.
you're short on dice, you scoop up a heavy weapons platoon, and you can plug it on to whatever
103.
army you've got.
Yeah.
And it is effectively 2 light mortars, inexperienced, an inexperienced platoon commander, and 2 regular anti-tank rifles. That gives you 5 order dice, and I am sure it comes out at 103 points.
Yep.
So it's a super cheap way to plug something into your army to boost the lists, to boost the order dice count.
And have sort of useful units. They're a little bit weak and vulnerable, but they can still do stuff, right?
Yeah, the anti-tank rifles, the 2 units that are mentioned there, as we go down a miniature rabbit hole, they were the two of the units that got boosts in version 3. Anti-tank rifles got the increased range from 36 to 48, and the light mortars got the boost as well in terms of range. So plugging them in, as I said, 103 points, 5 order dice, plug it onto any army you've got, and it'll make it better. So I know it hasn't happened at Beachhead as cleanly as that, but there are quite a few heavy platoons that are sort of very minimal, platoon commander and 3 inexperienced medium mortars, let's say. So I think when you look at those army lists that have got 4 platoons, that's where they're at. That 4th platoon isn't essential to the guts and the theme of the army. It's just a boost to the order dice count. I believe.
No, but I completely agree. That is one of the things that I find myself doing when building lists these days, just grabbing a heavy platoon to boost my order dice and throwing a lot of small units, sometimes even MMG teams in, because they give you something that is sort of useful and it really boosts your order dice for the rest of your list. So
what it
a lot
also
of players
does,
will think the same. Yeah.
What it also does, and it might be true of these Beachhead lists, it's the acquiring another platoon commander to go into one of your trucks or half tracks. So if you've got those combos of half track with an infantry squad and a platoon commander on an outflank, you can take the platoon commander from the heavy platoon and throw him in with the infantry as well. So it keeps those combinations more numerous in your army.
And it also gives you more 12-inch bubbles around an officer where you get the
it's
bonus,
more,
right?
As you said, it's more leadership bubbles. So no, I like the difference that we've seen now from Australia and the UK, and I know it's only 2 events, but
there is a clear difference.
It's that mindset.
For both events, though, I am noticing that a lot of people are also more or less doing the slot platoon with the artillery. So a lot of people will go and grab 2 artillery pieces, both of them AA guns, like light autocannons mostly, because they are so dirt cheap at 35 points. That'll give you an officer and 2 ambush pieces to plot down on the table as well for less than 100 points. So more or less same deal. Though I wonder who is taking 5 platoons and why.
We might find that out.
And then company commanders. When I read through the list, there was a lot of company commanders. That was what I felt. I started noting down every time someone had a company commander, and it was a lot of them. But actually, it's only about 11 players who's bringing a company commander. And when we talk to some competitive players, they'll say the company commander is completely broken and overpowered and should be banned. And we shall see whether or not these 11 people do better than average, and whether or not it's down to that. Mostly what I'm seeing is that they're taking the company commander to boost their multi-rocket launcher batteries. Like if you have a German battery of 3 Nebelwerfers, for instance, then you sit a company commander behind them and they'll shoot every turn.
The company commander is important if the build of your list needs them to be there. I've put together quite a number of version 3 lists now for gameplay, and sort of harken back to the tank power list that I've done in the past. That list needed a company commander to push the army forward. But the US air power list didn't need a company commander to do anything with it. And then I've had other sort of mixed bag German lists that have not needed the company commander at all, but having 3 platoon commanders on the field it spreads the bubble. So it's sort of, you've got more bubbles, but they're less effective, as opposed to one big effective bubble.
Yep.
which can be vulnerable. So they're not an automatic include. When you sit down, and start write your list, platoon commander, 2 infantry squads, and a company commander, he's not always needed to be there.
Yeah. But sometimes he really does boost your army build. That's at least what we're seeing right now, right? And then platoon types. This was also interesting because, or more or less expected, I guess. We're seeing a lot of those heavy platoons you talked about, where people just slot in a couple of order dice. We're seeing a lot of artillery platoons as well, but clearly the most taken is armored platoons. I've been saying this for a while. Armored platoons, because like go back to V2, the armored platoons, the tank platoons of V2, you didn't want them playing in a normal tournament because they would just win. And it's basically the same here. I don't think you can win a tournament now without at least looking at and thinking about armor. What are you seeing?
It's the statistics here tell a story, but I don't think the conclusion of the story is accurate.
Okay.
Because from version 2, a generic reinforced platoon, you would have 1 tank slot, 1 armored car slot.
Yep.
The minimum requirements for an armored platoon are 1 tank and 1 and/or armored car. So you have to dig into the lists to see if people are actually leaning properly into the armored platoon. If people are only taking 2 pieces of armor from that platoon, then they're not really doing anything different than they could have done from a generic platoon, other than they could double down on armored cars or double
From what
down on
I looked
tanks.
over, I think there are a couple of people who are only bringing 2 vehicles, but most people
Then,
who are bringing in our armored platoon are bringing 3 or more.
yeah, so anybody that's bringing 2 pieces of armor, be it 2 armored cars or 2 tanks, they're not really leaning into what an armored platoon is. They're just
Yeah.
mirroring what they could have done through a generic reinforced platoon.
Mm.
And even with the artillery platoons, the old GRP, you could get 1 artillery piece.
Yeah.
The minimum requirement for an artillery platoon is 1 artillery piece.
Yeah.
So it's as you start to dig in to the lists, that's when we find out if they're really actually going into a theme, if they're pushing in a particular direction. So,
Yeah.
So granted, people, yeah, it tells a story, but I don't believe it's the right outcome.
I was a little surprised looking over the artillery platoons that there are actually a few people bringing anti-tank guns. That's an interesting experiment because you can sit them on ambush and then flip to fire order, giving you a +1 to hit. Is it enough to make them worth it? I don't know. The other thing of note is, of course, that the recce platoons and engineer platoons are very, very rare. You don't. I mean, there's 2 recce platoons in total, and the engineer platoons, 7 people are bringing them. A couple of them are the usual suspects, people who always bring engineers and flamethrowers, right? So, and I guess that's the nerf that we've seen to the flamethrowers that's brought them down, and the recce platoons. I don't think people have found out what to use them for yet.
Yeah, what you said there is true, that the engineering platoons are not as popular simply because the flamethrowers are not as effective a tool anymore. The flamethrower has increased in price when it's built into an engineer squad. And the other aspect is that in the past, you used to be able to take engineering squads as part of your core requirement from a generic reinforced platoon, whereas now they are very much an add-on. So you have to have 2 infantry squads from your infantry platoon to unlock the engineers. So, in the past, you would see Soviet lists of, 3 5-man squads of engineers with 3 brain carriers.
Yeah.
Well, to get to there, you would have to now have a platoon commander, 2 infantry squads, and then you can get them. So it's more of a tax to get the flamethrowers in the army now, just because they used to be just infantry with flamethrowers. Now they are very specialized. So
Yeah.
I don't actually, what I'd like doesn't matter. But Reese platoons, yeah, still don't. I'm trying to figure out with everybody else. Like I know that people are, and from the list we might see this. We will see this. That the people that have taken recce platoons, I am very confident they are also taken engineer
Yeah.
platoons, so
Yeah.
that they have taken very cheap units from their recce platoons to buy very good recce transports to then
For the
give those
engineers.
recce, yeah,
Yeah.
to give those very good recce transports to the engineers.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's great.
Yeah.
Good,
Yeah. I
do it.
just think it's a lot of tax to be paying for that combination, but it is a good
It
combination
is.
though.
It is a huge tax.
So, your predictions, do you want to talk us through them?
Yeah, so these are my predictions for the top five. I'm gonna I'm gonna lay myself out on the line, and this is a combination of the lists that I've seen and the players themselves. So Richard Cheresco is playing Germany. He's got a 17 order dice list, and after reading it, it leans into a lot of his strengths.
Yeah.
Topher Buckle from the Juggernaut podcast, he's got a 19 order dice British Army, which we might talk about in the future. But it's he's got a lot of heavy armor,
Yeah.
but it's buried into transports, and he's got 2 Lees as well. And I think that would do very well. Gary Morgan, listen, anybody that doesn't put Gary Morgan in their top 5 is just crazy. You know, to
He's been on a roll these
yeah,
last couple of years, so yeah.
to use a movie quote, he's so hot right now
Yeah.
that you just wouldn't bet against him.
Yeah.
So no, I wish Gary the best of luck. Now, Johnny Curran, he has got a Finnish barbecue list. Now, Johnny's bringing one of the 8 Finnish lists that are turning
Yeah.
up. And, you know, I might make some predictions on all the Finnish lists. I think all the other Finnish lists are going to finish midfield or bottom.
Okay.
I do not believe that it can work with that many. And I think the Finnish mirror matches that will happen will be absolutely dull games. It'll be so boring, so just bleh.
Yeah.
But I believe because Johnny's got that touch of difference
Yeah.
with the
His list is
barbecue.
very different to the other Finnish
Yep.
lists. He does
I
bring a cheap T20s, but the
Yep, I think he
engineers makes a
can.
difference.
I
Yeah.
think he can rise above all the
Yeah.
other Finnish lists.
Okay.
And then Mr. Bellingham with his 16 order his German list. I just love the list.
Yep.
I don't know Mr. Bellingham personally, but looking at his list, it's the sort of list that I would bring to the
Yeah.
event. You know, it's 16 order dice, which is where
Yeah.
I like to play. Um,
It's
so
got
I think it could do well.
the Panzer threes as well,
Yeah,
while
yeah,
they
I
last
think
until armies of Germany kills them off.
yeah, that's fine. But what I'd also highlight here is that there are an enormous amount of good players attending this event, but they
Yeah.
all can't finish on top. They'll start
Yeah.
to knock each other out, take each other
And
down. I think all the finish lists will clump like a poo in cat litter, and they'll just glob in the middle of the field and not get anywhere. Other than Johnny, who'll rise above with flame power.
um, myself, I've also got a huge list, both based on players, of course, but also on just list and list build. I think some of the Finns will rise, but I don't agree with you, Ali, on who it will be. I think both Green and Russell Wright, they've got high order dice counts. They've got a lot of armor. They're playing with a lot of extra points for that discount you get for unreliable. I think both of those might do well, but we've also seen Finnish lists tank horribly, so you might be right. I think, of course, Richard, with his German mix there, that's a good list, and it has multi-rocket launchers. It has units that can go and sit down and just go on ambush and shoot. I mean, it's just a really good list, well thought out. And Topher, just because you have to figure him in as a player, I think the list is slightly weird, but it is something that Topher has been on a trip with these last couple of months. So I think he's comfortable playing what he's playing. Garrick has an 18 order dice Hungarian army, which I personally have a soft spot for. I love the Nimrods. And then, of course, Gary Morgan, his American barbecue.
So hot right now.
It's
So
so
hot.
hot. Yeah, yeah. You can't have I agree. You can't have a list without figuring Gary Morgan in somewhere on that list. I also think Paul Wickens is one to watch. He's playing Soviets. He's done that many times. 18 order dice with a lot of scouts in the list. I think also that's something he's very comfortable playing, and he could also do well with that. So my predictions is that we'll find the winner and a couple of other people for the top 5 in this group here, and the rest will knock each other out as they go
Mate,
along.
I've called my top 5. They will finish like that.
Right. I also think that there are a couple of things to watch as we go in. There's a lot of people still trying Death Stars, and I think me and Ali will at least talk about one of these lists in another video soon. There are a couple of German Death Stars. Sorry, there's a partisan Death Star that has a Panther. There's a German Death Star, 17 order dice Death Star, which I think also has a Panther as well. And then there's this weird list, 10 order dice, that has triple Death Star. So 3 very heavy, very chunky tanks. I think one of them is a Sherman Firefly or something like that. Um, so those I would watch. Can Death Stars actually do well? The last tournament I went to, there was a Death Star that did well. So it can happen, but will it in this environment? I don't know. And then, of course, as we've talked about, will barbecue be a thing? Can Johnny Curran and Gary Morgan do it? Can the Japanese fight back? We are seeing both a Japanese horde army style thing, and we're also seeing Japanese MSU. So the 25 order dice list, the highest order dice count, that's a Japanese list. Um, I personally believe that these lists will tank horribly and be murdered because everything can kill infantry now. But let's see what happens. That's yeah. Is this also what you're watching for, Ali?
It is the low order dice list that I'm keeping my eye on. That is I've got 2 learning paths. Just I know we're about to finish up this video, but I need to find out what can destroy air power. I already have a plan for that. And my next sort of rabbit hole I'm going to go down is the slightly lower order dice, higher quality unit
Yeah.
style.
And
So
can
I want to
that
keep
work?
I want to keep an eye
Yeah.
on how the lower order dice. And when I say low, I'm talking like 14 and below.
Yeah.
10 to 14 order dice at 1250. I
Yeah.
really want to see how they can do, because that, I believe there's something there, and I would
Okay.
like to explore it, and I am going to try.
You are going to try.
Yep.
Yeah, it goes against all the wisdom of V2, but I also think that there potentially, if the player is good, could be something there. So at least it's something to watch going forward. So thank you so much, Alex Bondax, for sending all of this info to me, and good luck to everyone going.
Good luck.
That's it from me and Ali here in this first video. Next time, I think we should look at a couple of lists.
Sounds like a plan.
That sounds like a plan. See you all. Cheers.